Good morning, one and all. I'm delighted to welcome you all here this morning. On the 4th of May 2017, I saddled up and slid beside Graham Moore in my role as voluntary HR ambassador for the Institute of Directors. And I said to Graham, wouldn't it be wonderful if the CIPD and the IoD could run a joint conference? And to his eternal credit, he said, let's do it. So I am delighted to welcome you all here for our third annual conference, and many more to come with a bit of work. I'm Richard Maybury, and I'm the voluntary chair of the Institute of Directors in Surrey. I now need to introduce you to our first speaker, and our first speaker is going to be Peter Cheese. But before we get into Peter, could I ask one of our sponsors, Zahid from Custodian, to come forward and say a few words. If it wasn't for Custodian and for Breathe, we wouldn't be able to run this conference at the price that we run it at. So, Zahid, you know the rule. You have a couple of minutes and that's it.
Starts now. Okay, morning everybody. Delighted to be co-sponsoring this event with Breathe. I suppose it's all about, we're all here today to learn about good leadership. And good leadership is kind of a fertiliser, isn't it? It grows good employees, good organisations, good cultures, and hopefully good clients. But there is one thing to acknowledge, and that doesn't mean that we ever become perfect. And mistakes happen, and people are human, and so we're quite irrational at times. And I suppose that's the space that we occupy. We do employment tribunal insurance, and whilst it's a kind of space where we see the problems, our offering is completely unique. It's probably different from anybody's offering in this whole room. And that's that people buy our product and they hope that they never ever have to use it. They buy it, put it in the drawer and hope they forget about it until renewal. So that's what they do, and for most people that is the case. That does, they can forget about it and they don't need to think about it until renewal. But for 1 in 10, there is a problem. There is an issue that has to be dealt with. And I'm not here to be a cloud of storm, we've had enough storms, but I have two observations really. And one is that the 1 in 10 that has the problem, it isn't just normally the worst business or the business that's run by the worst leader. Sometimes they're just unlucky. In fact, sometimes it's the better leaders, the ones that are making difficult decisions that end up having some friction and problems. And the second observation is, sort of from our clients, the ones I consider to be good leaders, they're the ones that actually always expect the best. They expect the best, they plan for the best, but they don't forget all the rest. So they've always got a little eye on what might derail them and what might blow them off course, and they're ready for it, and they cover their backs. But they don't dwell on it. But I will be dwelling around here today. And we've got loads of tat and coasters outside the room, so we can cover your tables if you like. And just come and have a chat. I'd love to speak to you. I'm looking forward to then. I'm an SME owner myself, so I'm going to be listening to some tips and seeing, interested to see what comes out today.
Thanks very much.
So ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to welcome you on behalf of the CIPD. This event, as Richard has said, started a few years ago, done by volunteers. And the idea was to bring a lot of senior people together so that we could discuss real-time issues that were affecting us around the whole of the country, not just locally, but to bring those people together so that you could talk in groups. But what I would like to do now, because you don't want to hear from me, I'm David Tinney, I'm branch chairman of the CIPD here in Surrey, North Hampshire. What I'd like to introduce is our CEO. Our CEO is Professor at the University of Lancaster. He has a list of doctorates, of awards, but I'm not going to talk about those. I'm going to allow him to introduce himself. Peter Cheese, our CEO.
David, very much, and also like to acknowledge Graham. Where's Graham? There he is. Long-standing chair of the Surrey and North Hampshire branch, which is my home branch, which is why I'm here. It only took me 15 minutes to get here. It's quite remarkable, because most times it takes me a lot longer to get to the different places I talk. So it's a real pleasure to be with you all, and thank you, Saeed, also for your support for the event, and of course Richard. It's fantastic when we do these shared and joint events, and I'm really thrilled that Charlotte Valera, the chair of the IoD, is with us today as well, and you're going to be hearing from her a little bit later. I'm going to hopefully set the scene. I think I've got about 4 hours or something. No, half an hour.
25 minutes.
To talk about diversity and inclusion, why it's so important. I think we are at an extraordinary period of time, aren't we, in many, many ways, and many different things which are driving the future of work. I've been in business a long time. I spent a lot of my professional career as a consultant, working at Accenture, working with organisations all around the world during the 80s, 90s and noughties. And I can tell you I've never seen more debate about the future of work, about what we do, why we do it, how it's changing. And it's being driven by all these things. It's being driven by a lot of global and political change, and I don't have to spell that out. Extraordinary things going on which would be very hard to predict and very hard to write the script about what's going to happen next. And it's not just about Brexit, it's about the growth of populism and many other things going on, and a very different political dynamic, and a different sense of what the future world might look like when we seem to be on this steady path towards globalisation, everything opening up and all the rest of it. Now we seem to be talking more about borders and tariffs and walls and goodness knows what. So you get all of that. You've got clearly a lot of economic uncertainty again. I think in the previous decades we tended to think as businesses it was all going to keep going in this direction, and now it's much harder to determine. A lot of disruption. Disruption seems to be the common byword of business in every sense, and a lot of it, of course, driven by technology. We talk a lot about digital disruption and how that's changing business models, new entrants. If you go back to Porter's 5 Forces model, I think the one that we have to worry about most are the new entrants. One we didn't even see, didn't even recognise as part of our sector, coming in and doing very, very different things, often enabled by technology. And then we've got social and demographic change, which is also huge. I mean, a lot of generational debates about Gen Y, now Gen Z. What's Gen Z called? Well, people talk about snowflake generations, they're lacking resilience, what's their belief about work? But actually these generations are coming into work and asking pretty profound questions about what we do and why we do it. What is the purpose of our organisation? And I did a lot of graduate recruiting in the 80s and the early 90s. I can tell you almost to the year when the questions that started to come from the audiences started to change. They weren't just interested in how much money they would get or whether they get a car when they became a manager or whatever. They were interested in what we did and why we did it. And these have become very profound questions now and talked about so much more. But you've got other things going on with demography. You've got ageing populations. You've got debates about 100-year lives and all these sorts of things. And of course, within social and demographic change, a lot more debate about diversity, which is what we're really here to talk about more this morning. And as I said, technological change. And that is a very heady mix. Some people describe it as almost a perfect storm of change going on, which is forcing us to go back to some really, really important principles about what we do and why we do it. I do think as part of that, it's putting much more people at the centre of the debate. And it's really extraordinary when you think about over the last few decades how people seem to have got squeezed out of the equation. It's all about economic return. It was all about profit and loss. It was all about financial spreadsheets and processes, and not a lot about people. And now we're in this space of saying, you know what? I mean, somebody, I think it was the head of one of the big accounting bodies, told me a few years ago, he said, there are only 2 things that you have in business. One is money, which we spend a lot of time counting, and the other is people, which we haven't understood terribly well, and all the sort of behavioural stuff and cultural stuff, which are harder things to measure, yet they are absolutely fundamental. So all these things like voice and recognition, and inclusion and purpose and well-being and alignment and shared values and so on and so forth, those have become so much more part of the business debate and dialogue, and that is very exciting. And certainly for us in the HR profession, this is putting, and should be putting, what we believe as a profession front and centre into the business debate. And we need to have that voice at the highest levels of organisations say, this is what we've got to understand better, because it's profoundly important to today and to the future of our businesses. And even ideas like compassion, and I could even go as far as say people talk about love at work, which is it's the essence of humanity. And that's what I think is so exciting about this. It's about humanity. It's about putting the human back into work, and I dare say also the human back into human resources.
Yeah.
Because HR has not been terribly good at this stuff, has it? I mean, we've been so focused on things like process and stuff. We've stepped away from the idea of the person and humanity. And believe me, you cannot do inclusion if you do not understand it from a human and humanity perspective. So as I said, I find this really exciting. It's driven by a lot of the changes that are going on. But I get constantly astonished, surprised, encouraged by the kinds of conversations that I have with CEOs or regulators or many others who are all talking about these kind of things and saying, right, how do we understand this stuff better? Because it is fundamental. And I do think also that means that for us in our profession, and many others besides, we've got to move beyond ideas of best practice. Somehow there's a manual and all we've got to do is jam that same stuff into our organisation and everything's fine. Because that's what we've been doing a lot of. And I plead guilty. As a consultant back in the 80s, 90s, and all this, a lot of the times we were going to organisations saying, here's best practice, that's what you should do. Here's what 50 other companies are doing, so why aren't you? And that's led us into things like, I don't know, performance management processes, which has always been one of my favourites, which have not been delivering what they're supposed to deliver. I mean, what is performance management for? Why do we do it? It's to improve performance, isn't it? But have we done that? Have we even really understood what performance is, particularly in more knowledge-driven businesses? And the processes that we've been implementing as part of that idea have not fundamentally improved performance. In fact, sometimes they've almost done the reverse. So the reality is we've got to move from an idea of best practice to best fit. What is your context? What's going to work in your environment? Yes, of course you can take ideas from other places, but do not imagine that somebody else has got the perfect solution. All you've got to do is just shove it in your organisation. And that's a different type of thinking. It's more challenging. It says we've got to understand the context of the business that we're in, we've got to understand its strategy and direction, and then we've got to work out what's going to work best for us and for our organisation. And it does say that we've got to be much more outcomes driven. If I go back to performance management, we were putting in processes without really understanding the outcome. We were just saying, well, here's the process and I've done my job. And here's a great big manual to explain to all the managers how to do performance management. But that wasn't what really should have been about. And that we are using evidence and something else that we're very passionate about and have embedded these ideas at the heart of the new profession map for our profession. Which is to say, we've got to be much more principles-led, what do we believe in, evidence-based, what is the evidence of what we do, and outcomes-driven in terms of understanding the outcome that we're trying to achieve. And evidence is really important. Evidence comes to lots of places, not least of which is from academia. And Charlotte and I were talking earlier about business school connections. IoD is connecting a lot with business schools, so do we. And that's really important because we've got to use more evidence and research into practice. And there's been this sort of big divide between academia and business. We've been in business too much driven by the ideas of trends or best fits or whatever, best practice or whatever. And academics, for their part, have been talking a language we haven't always understood. I mean, I often use the example of, and I'm sure some academics in the room, if I go to a business executive's office, I've never seen the journal of anything on my desk. They don't read it, do it? You might see HBR if you're lucky, unopened, just for impression. But the reality is we haven't had a language which we've been talking together, and it's so important that we bring that evidence into work and we understand the impact. And it's particularly important in the world of diversity and inclusion. There's a lot of things that we're doing around diversity. You think, is that really working? Is that the right thing to be doing? Another subject which links to closely things like well-being and mental health are the interventions that we're using to support mental health in the workplace. Are they actually working? Are they evidence-based? And we have to keep challenging ourselves on that basis as well. So you got all of that, and then, as I said, understanding culture and organisations. I love this old chart. So these people have got old school, so they've got a secret resentment, they've got an affair going on. That is humanity at work. Right? That is humanity at work. Organisations cannot be understood just by their organisation charts, can they? It's about the human dynamic. And that's what culture is. And so a lot of this debate about do we understand why organisations and why people do what they do? Do we understand culture? And we've been doing a lot of work with groups like the FRC, the Financial Reporting Council, on understanding culture, because the global financial crisis, in my view, it took 3 or 4 years after 2008 and the global financial crisis for people to recognise it wasn't because we didn't write enough rules. It was because we did not understand corporate cultures and behaviours. And now the debate is clearly shifted to say we have to understand culture and things like that. We have to understand what are the things that make people do what they do or make them believe what they believe. And that is a really important agenda, of course, for HR, and it is understanding all this sort of stuff. What sort of operating models work, and what are our ways in which we can run the business, and they're not all these traditional models that we've had in the past. And as we look at the future, certainly our access to skills and capabilities is changing all the time. We're going to see more of these networked organisations. We're going to see more movement of people in and out. We're going to see more, despite IR35, we are going to see more contingent contract workers, because that is how people are also choosing to work in many ways. Almost every organisation today would say they have skills shortages. And how we access those skills and where we access them from is clearly changing as well. So that leads us on to diversity and inclusion, why it's so important. And I always start these things, I don't care whether I'm talking about diversity and inclusion or well-being or corporate social responsibility or whatever. What is the business reason that drives these things? Because I also say that businesses don't tend to do things for altruistic reasons. They may do for a period of time, but they're not typically sustainable. If we cannot anchor these ideas at the heart of business strategy and understand the impact of them, they are not sustainable. And the interesting thing about diversity is we talk about it in so many different aspects now. And particularly for small business owners, as I talk to small business owners, it's almost overwhelming. I've got to think about race and gender, I've got to think about age, I've got to think about neurodiversity, different ways in which people think, I've got to think about disability, I've got to think about all these sorts of things. And you know what, if I don't think about these things, I may get myself in trouble. When I go recruiting, there are all these rules and laws, and a lot of small businesses say, that's part of my challenge. But why is it that we need to think about these things? Well, first and foremost, it is about access to skills. I mean, who in the room is not struggling to fill some of the posts or jobs that they have? I mean, it's becoming harder and harder. And it's becoming harder partly because the nature of jobs are changing as well, and the skills that we need are changing as well. People talk about a half-life of job skills now that is 5 years or less. I don't know how you measure those sorts of things, but it sort of makes a point that we are having to upskill and reskill much more. And how we find these people and access to skills is a very good reason why strategically we've got to think more diversely. It is clearly also about innovation and creativity. We all know about groupthink. We all know that if we keep recruiting people who look like ourselves and think like ourselves and being educated like ourselves, we're going to get the same outcome. I mean, you've heard a lot about Dominic Cummings and his desire to recruit weirdos and oddball. Yeah, he made a point, although I don't know if you read his full statement, but at the bottom where he said something about you forget HR and all of that. Did you read that? Yeah, he did. And now he's beginning to reap the wind of that. So, but the reality is, he had a point. That you need to bring different people with different experiences, different ways of thinking to break the cycle of groupthink. And we need that in government as much as we need in private sector. But you have to be careful how you do it. So you've got the innovation and creativity point, which I think we all understand. Community and customer connection. It is incredible when you look at businesses today, and certainly in the past, how they do not represent their customer groups. Or the communities which they're part of. I remember talking to Andy Griggs, who was the head of Aviva, when he first joined Aviva, and he went to Sheffield, and they had a big call centre or operational centre up in Sheffield, and he walked from the station to the operational centre, and what did he see in terms of the community that he was part of? He saw an incredibly diverse, particularly ethnically diverse community, and when he got into the operations centre, what did he see? He didn't see that. He saw something different. He saw a much less diverse organisation. So this is also really, really important, and particularly when we talk about the future of responsible business and local connection and being part of the community, because business is part of society. It hasn't always thought about itself like that, and it hasn't always behaved like that, but responsible business profoundly is part of society and community. And that to me is another very important driver that we need to have businesses therefore that reflect the communities that we're part of. So you got that, and without doubt, future-proofing. Without doubt. I mean, all those things lead to future-proofing. So there's a very compelling case for it, but we still have a lot to do. Yes, we're making progress. It's fantastic to see how much more being talked about. There is more pressure from the regulatory environment and government and things like reporting on gender pay gap, and that is not going to stop. But I, for one, really do believe that whilst I'm supportive of things like gender pay gap and certain rules in some of this, most of it's going to needs to be driven by businesses acting responsibly. Because the interesting thing about gender pay gap is that, yes, I think you can show it's beginning to have some effect. And I know the media jumps on our backs all the time and says, well, it's no different from what it was last year. Well, everybody needs to understand it's going to take a bit longer than just 1 year. But the reality is force some attention on it. Now, the question becomes, so do you extend it to ethnicity and a lot of other characteristics of diversity? And it gets harder and harder. You get into intersectionality, you get into a lot of debates about things like, well, how do I categorize people in these different ways? And how do I do that in ways which are not, frankly, intrusive? So you get all of that sort of debate. But I don't think there's a balance to be achieved between saying, and the government is pushing on things like ethnic pay gap reporting and so forth, to say, all right, so we need some of this to prompt businesses to pay attention to it properly, but we also need businesses to step up and respond and show that they are taking it seriously. And acting, as I said before, on principles, not just rules, and a principle that we believe in inclusion. And we believe and we understand what it's about. But you know, you can read that there are lots of quotes and lots of stats about, well, how are people really feeling? You know, if I'm gay or if I'm ethnic, from a different ethnic background, am I really treated in the same way as everybody else? Am I treated fairly? Do I have my voice heard? Or is there inherent bias in how we work and operate as businesses? So there may be more debate in some of the breakouts on some of these things. But yeah, I think in the end, what's inclusivity? Well, inclusivity is these sorts of things. When I feel part of something, I value for my own unique skills and abilities. I'm treated, in other words, as an individual as well as part of a team or a collective. I can be authentic. It's incredible how many people go to work and they hide things. You can sort of see it from some of the stats previously. They hide their sexuality. They hide maybe some of their disabilities. I've done quite a lot of work with groups like the Autistic Society. They talk about masking. You know, these people get to a point where they say, in order for me to have any chance of working in this environment, I've got to mask these things. And I've got to adapt my behaviour so that I conform. Because if I don't conform, I'm not going to get on. And that is all born out of, as I said, I think a long-standing culture of businesses which has said, well, it isn't about humanity, it is about conformity. It is about getting people to do the same things and having the processes to get them to do the same things. And it's this idea, therefore, I don't always need to conform to belong. And it's again, go back to Dominic Cummings, part of what he's saying. You get people who are different, they don't all have to conform. If they all conform in the same way, you end up with the same result. You end up with a group thing. But these are challenging things to do because as a business person, as a leader, isn't it so much easier when you say, well, everybody does the same thing, you all work in the same way, you all turn up at the same time, you all work the same hours, you all do what I tell you to do. But the fact is, we're not robots. That's what robots do. Humans don't tend to. But the great strength of humanity is that we are different. And that's the whole point of inclusion. And that, you know, that they do perceive their organisation to be fair. They perceive it to be fair. And if you go out and ask people, you know, from all these different backgrounds that you've got in your organisation, do they think it's fair? Do they think they're treated fairly? Or do they think that they're having to conform in some ways in order to fit a norm, in order to progress? And these are the really deep-rooted questions that we have to be asking in our organisations. And therefore, critical areas to think about. Well, employee behaviour, I mean, the reality is inclusion is something we all have to think about. Not just me as a leader or the line managers. Yes, of course, they have a critical role. But this is something we all have to understand. And as I said, humanity is an interesting thing. I mean, if you go back to our own sort of, you know, how our brains are wired, we see difference typically as a threat. You go back to when we all ran around, if you've read things like Sapiens, we were all running around the place of Africa or wherever it was. That was how our brains were wired. You know, we look at people like ourselves and say, yeah, that's likely to be a friend. We look at people who are different and say, no, that's likely to be a threat. And we have to understand that. It's part of our inherent bias that creates some of the challenges that we see. So we have to understand for everybody, this is everybody's responsibility. And we've all got a responsibility to treat people fairly and at face value and all these other ideas. Clearly, we've got to build line manager skills and capabilities. I mean, it's a remarkable fact, isn't it? When we think about what have we done in the last 20 or 30 years in terms of training line managers to be good people managers? And the answer in most cases is very little. We've promoted them because they're technically competent. We promote the best salesperson to be the sales manager, the best computer programmer to be the computer program lead. And then we say, right, now get on and manage. Well, the reality is all the trends of work I've described is making that job harder and harder. You can't just say, go manage when you've got a diverse team. And I mean diverse in every sense, including the fact that people are working part-time and working flexibly. Now guess which, did you notice on the GPG, gender pay gap, there was a negative variance for part-time workers. Now, why is that? Huh? Because they're mainly women. And what is our natural bias towards people working part-time? How do we evaluate somebody who's working full-time as in my face, 9 to 5, probably there actually before I arrive and there after I've gone, just to prove how hard they're working, than somebody who's working part-time? What's our natural bias? No, they're not committed. Oh, they're working from home. Yeah? And all that kind of stuff. So these are really, really important things. We have to teach our managers, and we have to hold them accountable. It's not just that, yeah, great job, you knocked the ball out of the park with your sales, but did you manage your team effectively? Did you make it inclusive? Did you get the best out of all of them, no matter who they were or how they were? And evaluate them on those things as well. Clearly senior commitment to inclusion, there's no doubt about that. You've got to have business leaders, and you've got to have a business leadership that not only physically represents diversity, but speaks the language and understands it, and understands why it's important to the organisation. And not just at a surface level. Which is why I always debate about, okay, is your senior leadership team diverse? You know, the Stevens Alexander and all these reviews that have been done on have I got diversity in my top teams. Not just at the board, but coming down to the organisation. And that is the most visible commitment of all, in my view, is that you've got senior leadership that is diverse and is speaking that language. Policies and people management practice quite clearly, I'll talk a little bit more about one or two of those, I've already touched on some of them. An organisational values, climate and culture. Because no matter what practices we put in place, if the climate and the culture and people aren't behaving in the right ways, you won't succeed. You can, I mean, it's scary sometimes when you look at the stats of people who are trying to recruit into their organisation. People are very different, they're from very much more diverse backgrounds than the norm. And then you look at how long they stay. And I think one of the most important stats is when we're doing recruitment, particularly at these mid and senior levels, is how long do people stay? Not that you filled the job, but did they stay? And if they didn't stay, then why was it? Well, typically, people join organisations where they leave managers and all that kind of debate, right? So we need to understand this stuff at that sort of level. So issues to address. You know, I've touched on most of this already, but first of all is the buy-in commitment. And as I said, what is the business case? Why are we doing this? It's not just because we're trying to be politically correct, although it is politically correct. We're not just trying to be woke and all of that. We're trying to do it because it's important to our business. And if we don't understand that, as I said before, then I'm not sure these things are sustainable. So that sort of business case and visible leadership from the top is the starting point. We've then got to understand, of course, as I said, the organisational context. There's not one certain manual you can take off the wall and say, that's what exactly I've got to do. But how does my organisation work, locally, nationally, internationally? Is it one big sort of global enterprise where I can just have standard policies and everybody does the same thing? Well, maybe, but even if you've got that, you've still got to recognise the issues of diversity are different in different places. And when I go to, even within the United Kingdom, when I go to places like Scotland, there's obviously less ethnic diversity there. I look around this room, there's not a lot of ethnic diversity. Now, is that our fault, or is that also part of the community? I mean, the reality is, you know, North Surrey, Guildford, is not a terribly ethnically diverse part of the country, is it? And yet, as I made an example before, if I go to Sheffield, it's very different. So we've got to understand that local context as well. We've got to understand our organisational operating model. Sometimes you can implement these things with lots of central practice, and that's how the culture works, and sometimes it is not. It's very local, and it's about what you do locally. And what are the key pressures to the organisation? Again, what are the things that are going to be driving right down to recruiting managers as to why this is important to do? Is it skills shortages? Is it about creating more innovation in the organisation and so on? The people data, is, again, I touched on, also so important. If we do not understand what the diversity of our organisation is now, then it's very hard to build from it. Now, GPG is an interesting example. I talked to many HR leaders, very senior HR people, who were getting a bit of a fluster when we first introduced gender pay gap. I said, that's all very complicated, very different. I said, well, why weren't you doing it already? Why did you not understand this already? And I don't care what metrics we use, how to do quartiles or whatever. We needed to understand this, and we weren't on it. So gender pay gap, as I said, I think it has prompted a lot more of this debate. But it gets harder, doesn't it? I talked about ethnicity. Another big debate going on, socio-economic diversity. And how do I measure that? We're doing a lot of work with organisations like the civil service. And the civil service, from the very top, John Alexander, Chief Executive, on down, has said the civil service needs to be the most diverse organisation in the country. Now, why would that be? Well, it's because the civil service represents us all. And when I made the point about organisations representing their customer base, that must be true of the civil service. But the question that we've been working on with them is, how do you measure this and understand it across all these protected characteristics? And it gets harder. As I said, when you look at things like socio-economic status, how do you measure that effectively? If you go to the ONS way of measuring it, they've got something like 14 questions, most of which, many people, if you just trotted out those questions, would find quite offensive. Or I'd certainly ask the question, why ask me now? Why would ask me questions like, did I have free, I'm 40 years old, and you ask me questions like, did I have free school meals when I was 14? Or what my parents did? And you have to be really sensitive about how you ask these questions. You've got to explain why and what you're going to do with it. Because this is another of the, we talk so much about data, about people, analytics and all those things, but oh my goodness, must we be transparent about why? What are you collecting the information for, and what are you going to do with it? And if you did understand my socio-economic status, what does that mean? What are you going to do with that? Do I now get extra preferential treatment to get promoted or not? What does it mean? So we're going to be very transparent about why we're collecting it. We're very sensitive about how we collect it. And that may be one of the debates amongst tables and things, but it's a very important point, and we do need the evidence, and we do need the data, but we've got to think carefully about how we get it. Then you get things like recruitment and progression. This person fit versus diversity. Don't you think in recruitment we so often use this language, say, well, we need to make sure these people fit our values and culture. Well, that can be code, but not a very transparent code, but yeah, I want people to look like me. And I remember a guy called Rennie Carriol, who you may have come across many years ago when I was still at Accenture back in the 90s. We were talking about some of this stuff, and he said to me, when was the last time you recruited somebody truly scary? I've never forgotten that, because it just landed in my head. It's get back to my point about how our brains are wired. So it's completely different from me. Well, you're instantly, that's how your amygdala, your emotional responses, and you have to get past that. So it is this language is self-used that I'm going to make sure I've got a cultural fit. And what we're often saying is, yes, I'm going to reject people who aren't like me. Don't fit the corporate norm. And we have got to understand that and work on those cultural values and norms. Say, yes, but that's going to be inclusive. And if it's not, I'm going to achieve my objective. And these are deep things to understand about the behaviour and the culture of the organisation. And then, this whole debate about positive action. Should I positively promote people? Should I promote more women because I haven't got enough women in the senior ranks? And if I do that, how do I do it? And I talked to years about, one of the scariest things I've ever done is I chaired, I was asked to be the executive sponsor for the Women's Network at Accenture. And I remember going into my first event, there were 500 women in the room and me. And that, it's an interesting experience when you go into places where, because I'm used to being as a white middle-aged male in the norm, and then suddenly find you're not. But what the women were talking about was a lot of this sort of stuff. Now, how do you get the organisation to work in a way that I don't feel like being promoted just because I'm a woman, or have the men thinking that is the case? And we have to understand things like mentoring and sponsoring and support. Because I'll tell you another thing, just when I'm talking about the gender balance thing. And there's been a lot more recent debate about this. Is women don't tend to ask in the same way that men do. They don't tend to ask. And so a simple example I've often used is if there are 10 characteristics that you have to, boxes you've got to tick for the next promotion. Men will tend to say, well, I know I can do 4, I'm pretty good at the next 3 or 4, and I'll blag the rest. Women are thinking, well, unless I can tick 9 out of 10, I'm not sure I should really put it. These are generalisations, but I'm not sure I put myself forward. So actually, yes, some forms of mentoring and sponsoring to promote and support women and to encourage them to put themselves forward is important. And it's true of ethnic groups, and it's true of many other diverse groups as well. So I'm a real fan of things like sponsorship and mentorship. Now, whether we should use targets is another debate. And of course, we are encouraged to have targets. Organisations are being encouraged to say, well, I'm going to have 50-50 women or whatever it is by X date. And that's for you to decide. I said there isn't one manual that decides all of this stuff. I think in some environments and contexts that works. And others it will be much more challenging. And there's also the debate about should we have quotas. And I've done a lot of work with people like Vicky Price, the economist, who's a strong advocate of the idea we should have quotas, for talking particularly about gender, but also about ethnicity. Because she believes, as many do, if you really, really want to change things, you're going to have to put a lot more pressure into the system. And there's people in government who think similar things as well. So the regulators also talking about some of these ideas. So that's a sort of quick run around of some of the dimensions and areas. Just wanted to touch on a couple of final points. I think underlying all of this, so we can talk about all these different characteristics, we have to be really, really careful, particularly when we're talking about diversity and inclusion and teaching managers about it. We don't say, well, this is how black people are, this is how Indian people are, this is how women are, this is how young people are, this is how people are with disabilities, and make it all look like that. The language has shifted from diversity and inclusion to the idea of inclusion. Inclusion, not just diversity. But of course it's bringing all these different groups and people together. But it's about inclusion. And then it says, okay, so what are some of the practices that are inclusive? And one of the ones that I'm very passionate about, and I've been co-chairing a flexible working task force of government on this, is flexible working. And I, for one, believe that the future will be flexible. And it's interesting, I don't know if you know this, but John Maynard Keynes, the great British economist, almost 100 years ago said, by now, he thought we'd be working 15-hour weeks. I don't know about you, but most of us seem to be working 15 hours a day. So what the hell's going wrong? Why are we not doing this? And there's lots of reasons. You know, we've all been growing in productivity and all these other things. But there's also a huge amount of cultural stuff. I don't know if many of you work in financial services as an example. But, oh my God, I mean, why do they work in the ways they do? I got friends of my daughters who working in things like investment banks and barely get any sleep at all. And I'm like, why do we do that? Why is it that we have a culture that demands that of young people and expects them to be productive, or even expects them to stay? Why would you do that? Well, okay, when I grew up and went into business, that seemed to be the norm, so you just had to work when you had to work. But, it talks about demographic change. Young people just don't accept this stuff anymore. They don't say, well, that's how it's got to be, so that's what I'm going to do. They say, well, why? That's why they're called Generation Letter Y. They're all Generation WHY. And why not? So yes, I think this is a really important thing, but we have to understand a lot of cultural dynamics and many other things that we've already touched on. And then ultimately, I think, one of the most important outcomes for the future work is well-being. It's so profound and it's so important, and we haven't paid enough attention to it. And interestingly, just a little bit of history for CIPD. Some of you probably know this, that the history of the CIPD started just over 100 years ago. And they were the Welfare Workers Association. And they worked in some of these businesses like Rowntree's and Cadbury's and Lever Brothers, which are still around today, incidentally. And they did what it said on the tin. And as I said, I think we've gone through a long cycle of squeezing the human out and saying it's about numbers, it's about people as assets, and we've used that language, people as resources, and now we're talking about humanity at work. And I think there's nothing more human than understanding well-being. Is this job good for me? Is it good for my physical, emotional, mental health? So much more debate about mental health. And diversity is a big driver of that. If I'm in an environment I have to mask, I have to pretend that I'm not the person that I am, or I have to work and I'm under all these intense extra pressures just because of who I am, then that is not going to help with my well-being. So I'm going to leave it there because, as I said, I think this ultimately is one of the real goals for the next decade, is we've got to create work that is good for people. All the debate about good work, if you've seen that, is a big agenda for us in our profession. Because I think in HR, we have got to focus on these ideas as critical outcomes of what we do. So I'm going to leave it there, and thank you very much. I think we'll get into some of the
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Peter. Thank you. Okay, so, and the CIPD documents, most people will have seen these outstanding sort of research-based work, so solid stuff there. Our next speaker is Charlotte Valor. Charlotte, amongst her many other roles, is the chair of the Institute of Directors. She also has founded a couple of organisations. She also sits as an NED on a FTSE 250 company and other companies, and she's also representative on the representative board for government organisations, the LSE, Primary Market Group, and she's a member of the Hampton Alexander Review sort of group. So Charlotte, the floor is yours. And while Charlotte comes up, remember that we're going to have the table topics, and you've already got loads of information from Peter to be sharing. Charlotte, the floor is yours. Thank you so much.
great to be here today and have all of you. Great to be here. So it's very interesting. There's so many areas that we are aligned in. So it's really good to hear. Just some of the things that you said, I thought maybe just quickly comment on from some of my own experiences, like it was scary. Just a couple of months ago, I was interviewing for another chair position of the state entity in the country, and apparently I was on top of the list. So I came in for the interview, and I thought it went okay. And afterwards, I didn't get it. And I was like, okay, so what did I do wrong? What were the things that didn't fit? And they said, you scared the life out of the board members. What does that even mean? What does that even mean? I was like, okay, that's slightly on the face on common. What else was there? And he's all had to look at my notes. There was nothing else. There was nothing else than that fact that I scared him. And I just thought, that's just weird. I mean, am I scary? I just thought about this and like, how scary am I? How bad can I live go? The whole fitting in my sort of current motto is hire someone who doesn't fit in. That's the only way you get challenged. That's the only way you have a chance of finding someone who has knowledge that you haven't got and you can therefore learn. And you must always assume that the person in front of you knows something that you don't know. It's just a fact. It's always, no matter who you have in front of you, that person will know something that you don't know. So not fitting in is pretty key. Around the whole targets, for the organizations I'm serving on board of, there will be diversity targets, there will be KPIs, will be pay gaps, ethnicity gaps, same for the IoD. Last year we had a long discussion of whether we should publish our ethnicity gap. We published our pay gap, and I was like, and now the ethnicity gap, and people, it doesn't look so good. I said, well, if it doesn't look good, it's because we have been okay with making it not look good, and not been on top of that, exactly to your point. So if we have one that doesn't look good, we put it out there, and then we talk about how we're going to make it look good, and then we apologize for not having done that earlier. And people, so anyway, this year, for last year, I said, well, I'll let it go this year, but next year it's there. It's going to be there, and we'll have the conversations no matter what it looks like. And I think that's very, very important, trying to have that. And the whole people and planet discussion, so we had, that was the triple bottom line, PPPs. It was actually recalled last year, people, planet, profit. And it's recalled because it doesn't fit anymore. What we're looking for now is people, planet, prosperity. And the prosperity is for the people and the planet. And the profit becomes second. Give us another 5 to 10 years and profit is going to be like a poo-poo word. Like, nobody needs to mention that. It's about the impact we have. It's about how we create prosperity. And that was just a few of them. The 15-hour week. Well, Sweden is actually having 25-hour week. So it is being pushed in places and in countries. We just need to try to do that more. I used to work at Stock Exchange Trader in Denmark, and then in the city in the 90s. And then it was about how many hours could you be there, and if you had to leave early, you left your coat in the chair. You were still there. And then I happened to be promoted in dealing room to 300 people, 299 men and me. And then so you get to, that's what I sort of grown up in. And of course when I then got promoted, it was because I was sleeping with the boss. There was no other reason. It was not because I actually did a good job. No. She's most definitely sleeping with the boss because that's how you get promoted when you're a woman. That was the happy 80s. And 90s, things has maybe changed a bit, but I'm not entirely sure. So these are the kind of things that leaders today need to be looking at and need to consider. That's what we expect people to have a holistic view of the world, professionally and personally. Relentless pace of work requiring continued adaptation and flexibility. How do we actually work around that? Develop vertical leadership maturity, which is what I'm going to talk about today. Because I've been banging around in diversity and inclusion for about 15 years. I'm tired, I'm very tired. And so are all the other people who've been doing this for that long, and we haven't seen enough progress. Never mind gender, but talk ethnicity and all the other differences that people can have and bring to the table in neurodiversity is just not moving enough. So I've been doing a lot of thinking because what was that, a year ago I had a meeting around the Alison Rose Review for female entrepreneurs. And with this group of women around the table, King and Morrissey, the woman whose name I've forgotten who did the White Company. So a group of women that they sort of draw on for this. And we were all looking really tired. It's like, I don't know about you, but I'm just feeling like this is not working. This is like, we've done everything we could for over a decade. We've mentored, we've supported, we've given awareness, we've done so much, and still we just don't get this diversity. It's just like a small group of people, and you're either in or you're out, and most people are out. It's not just about men and women, it's also about a different kind of men, right? It's like, how do we open this up so that we benefit from a much broader group? And I kept thinking, because what will happen just with gender, for example, is that the more tired this group of women that they draw on will be, the more likely it is to say, just go to say, just move on, we can't do this anymore. Next. And it's getting to that stage. But we're all sitting looking at each other, looking noticeably 15 years older, and thinking, we don't want to be here in another 15 years, and realize that no progress has been made, or not enough. So I'm not saying nothing has been made, we've done okay, it's not enough. As soon as you go below the footsies, for example, just with gender, nothing has happened. If you go into private equity, SMEs, nothing has happened. And that just needs to change. So looking into sort of traits around inclusive leaders, I think we need to consider some of these kind of things, awareness of biases, curiosity about others, cultural intelligence, emotional intelligence, all these kind of good things that you were talking about as well, that we know that everyone needs. The opposite of that is that you overpower others, you display favoritism, and you discount alternative views. And we're still seeing a lot of that, unfortunately. So what I was thinking, okay, something else is in the way. What is that something else? What is it we need to consider to actually move this agenda on? So, we talk about vertical leadership. We've got vertical, we've got horizontal. Horizontal leadership is knowledge. You gather more knowledge, that's the owl, right? Knowledge, 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 knowledge. And it's all about that. But the vertical leadership is something else. Awareness, insight, self-growth, inner growth. It's when you go up that curve, that you actually start becoming more and more aware of the world in a holistic view, in a much bigger picture. And then when you merge the two, you get inclusive leaders. How do we go about that? Now, there's a lot of these kind of things out there, so I've just taken some random companies that are doing work in this. I don't do work in this, but I read a lot about it. So this is leadership maturity framework. How do you mature as a leader when you go around vertically as opposed to just horizontally? And if you can see this whole side over here is very much unconscious. So we talk about unconscious biases, right? So one, I think it's a bit of a convenient word to use for actually just being passively biased, fully consciously, but anyway, we are working over here.
Passively biased.
Well, I mean, it's right? I mean, I think we've all had it. So over here, we're less conscious about lots of things, pretty much everything, in fact, right? So we're constructing a separate self on an island. I mean, Visa. Everybody thinks that they are separate from the whole. Organization thinks that they grow separate from the whole. In the end of the day, we are all part of one self, right? And if you look at that one piece, it's the earth, it's the people, it's all of us together. What you do today to someone else, you do to part of yourself. And we need to operate at that level where we understand that when we hit someone, we hit part of ourselves. And we are just not there, right? We're just not there. So these are the different stages of leadership maturity. They've sort of said sort of from 1 to 6, and there might be a 7th that's emerging. And how do you work up of those levels? And most people work at level 2 to 4. I think maybe Donald Trump is down here. I think. Sorry, I'm so sorry I didn't say that. Everybody has different qualities to bring to the table at different times, right? For certain organizations, if you're in a specific situation, maybe a really tough turnaround or restructuring, maybe you do need people that are just very driven and can cut through and don't get too involved with the people that you have to actually recycle, whatever you want to call it. And then as you move up, what I have seen, I've done a lot of work with younger people. I have under 25 mentors myself, so I have 18 to 25-year-olds mentoring me in how they live, what they've done in the last 6 years. And they mentor me for a year, we speak once a month. I realized none of them is going to buy television or buy first flat or move into their first house. Do the people making televisions know that? Do the people on the boards of the companies making televisions know that? I think not. I actually think they don't know this. It'll be a bit like another blockbuster, so, oh, nobody wants to go down to the shop and rent a video anymore. Gosh, we're not lost. It will be a bit like that, and big companies are going to go bust because they're not in touch with how it is with younger people. And there's no reason not. There's enough of them that could mentor. If we open the door and said, come in, talk to me once a month for 12 months and tell me about how you live. Who are your influencers? Who are the influencers of the young people today? Right? I think we saw that a little bit during the election, but we had Stormzy and KSI coming out saying go vote. Right? So my boys, I have 3 teenagers, 16, 18 and 20, and my boys are 18 and 20. They followed KSI. It's a young black man from Manchester, I think. My children are mixed. They're half Ghanaian, half Danish. And my boys identify as black, even though they're actually more than 50% white. I mean, it's labeled like it's going to be black, so that's what they are. Excellent. And they follow this KSI. 350,000 followers, about 5 years ago. Today he's got 21 million followers. We have 21 million people watching him on their phone every day. Every day. Sometimes many times a day. What politician has that kind of access? None. Right? And it didn't become apparent. I think this is nothing I've been banging on about for years. What are we doing as leaders to connect in with these influencers? We're not. Because we operate here. We're not seeing the bigger picture that drives it all together. And if we don't reach out, we lose out. So and the next step is the whole leadership journey to wisdom. So wisdom for me is a combination of knowledge and the inner understanding of the world as a big picture, where you draw people in. And we need to climb up that ladder to be able to do everything you said. If we don't climb up that ladder, we are not doing anything. And this is my worry. I speak to all these young people. They seem to start, and this is, we look at Maslow, and then he's pyramid, this is quite normal. They start at a higher level, because actually they haven't had Second World Wars. My parents was in the Second World War, where I had 5 million concentration camps. They remembered it, so they were sort of still quite focused on, let's get the basics right. And the Western world did that after the last, for my generation and all, but the next generation didn't have to do that in the same way. So they can, from an earlier stage, focus on the more high levels of self-questioning, self-actualizing, and actually go into that sphere that sits up here in the greens and the blues. And the thing with this is, only 15 to 20% of the population does that. And the rest of us are down here. So it's not about so up and down, but it kind of is, because if we're going to move in to the prosperity, to the inclusiveness, to actually understanding why it's so important, we have got to develop our leadership maturity. If we don't do that, nothing will change. So I want to be a bit provocative with that with people, because I actually need people to open their eyes and actually see, do you know what, developing more, as you said, of this framework, that, and this, and all the mechanical things actually doesn't work. If you can't lead from a level where you question yourself, you question, is that right what I'm doing? Should I be doing something else? What do people think about me? You're open to people challenging you. In a boardroom, if I have directors that doesn't challenge me, I challenge them to why they don't challenge me, right? And we should challenge each other. We should question everything, because it's actually through that that we grow. We get more knowledge. I love people who disagree with me, because it's through working through that disagreement that I grow, and hopefully they grow too. And no matter what kind of disagreement you have, you must see it as an opportunity to grow. It's a positive, it's not a negative. And when you turn it around like that, your conversations become something else. And I think that's very, very important to try to hold on to and bring with you. And then there's a different way to say, okay, well, how do we actually work with this? This is just one way a company is doing it, where they move into sort of unlearning leadership. In a sense, we need to unlearn what we used to do something else. So what is it we need to unlearn to achieve a quality of the qualities you were talking about as well that leaders need today? If the quality is patience, then we need to unlearn doing and learn presence, right? You have presence, you can have patience. So these kind of workings that you can do at home, inside, your own office or wherever you are, or with a little group of the people you talk through, allow yourself to be a bit vulnerable. Allow yourself to say, I'm not so good at this, well, I wonder how I can get a bit more over here. Then we can truly embrace diversity and inclusivity. Then we can truly be inclusive because we listen to people with different opinions. And we not only listen to them, we're curious. We want to have those different opinions because we know it makes us grow, right? That's the kind of leadership we need to move over to that operates at that much, much higher level. I think we can do this in scale, but we can't do it if we haven't got the first level of awareness. Just come out of the sleep of being at the 1, 2, 3, 4. Come out of that sleep, open eyes and say, ooh, that's something more. And this lasts all life. I mean, lifelong learning. I mean, I think we also say this. But do we actually do it? Do we continue to allow ourselves to be challenged, to continue to learn and to grow? Or do we just sit in our... So the thing is, to move up the staircase, you actually have to be uncomfortable, more uncomfortable staying that you are moving up to the next step. Otherwise, it doesn't happen, right? If you're really comfortable where you are, then go stay there. It's when actually you start feeling there must be something more. You can't kind of force it, and you also can't drop over steps. You have to do one by the other to get up to the next levels. And when we look at boardrooms, so with the younger generation starting at a high level, I think within the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to have generational clashes big time if my generation and up doesn't learn to do more of this. Because then you will have the leaders in their 30s pushing in hard, and actually the way they operate is way more sophisticated than the way we're seeing current senior leaders operate. So if we don't embrace that, we're going to be in trouble. So it's better to start looking at it now and then working our way through some of this, even if it feels a bit painful or a bit uncomfortable, because it does. Inner growth is painful. And moving and actually, well, I've done this for 20 years, but I should have done something else. Not enough, but you have to realize, now I'm going to do something else. You also have to own the fact that you can now see that what you did the last 20 years was shit. That's the problem. Excuse me my language, I'm sorry. That's another bias, wasn't it? What activity? Yeah. So that whole acknowledgement of just all these differences comes through being open to these different kind of people that comes in front of you and says things that feels really uncomfortable. Or what do they do in schools? They beat it out of the young people. So my children might be slightly provocative in that way. So I probably brought them up in the more Danish sort of free way. You express what you feel and you put it all on the table. And their father, my now ex-husband, unfortunately, he was like, no, you can't do that because he's British, right? He's born and he's like in the system what the teacher says it's always right. I was like, well, that's not right. I'm going to go to the headmaster and say so. And oh my God, you can't do that. Well, I am anyway. And so some of the headmasters will be like, ooh, that's uncomfortable. She's back. But like when teachers start humiliating students, I'm not having that. You're not going here humiliating. My daughter came and said that the teacher was humiliating one of her classmates. So I said, I'm going to go to school. She said, could you not, Mom? I said, no, I'm going to go to school. And today she said that she would do the same. I went in and said, humiliation, name-calling, down-putting, undermining, all of that is what your teachers are doing to these young children. I'm not having that. If I hear that again, there'll be a written warning. And I would expect to see something come back. So I think they're so happy I'm leaving next year. Hopefully they learn, right? Hopefully they learn along the way. Someone challenging them on the old-fashioned ways of slapping kids around. Not on. It's not on. The young people I work with and I speak to, and of course I'm trying to advise them with children, I think they're fantastic, but I mean, they have real insights. They have real insights. They come up with stuff that's over there on their phone, but they learn on the phone, right? My son at 12 came and said, oh, have you seen that Apple did turn over $2 billion last year? I was like, no, are you looking at Apple's accounts during the night? Or what? So I just happened to come by it. They just see so much and learn so much, and we should not underestimate. We are vastly underestimating these younger generations. It's going to hit us right in our face within the next 5 to 10 years if we don't start pulling ourselves together. Jordan Peterson is one of my favorite influencers. He's late 50s now. He's a professor from Toronto. And I draw a lot on him because he actually influences, especially a lot of young people. Young boys, especially like late teens or 20s, are leaning a lot into Jordan Peterson. And he's a very, very top-rated professor. And he became sort of globally known in the end, suddenly, because he was saying, I don't like pronouns. I don't want to, having to remember all kind of different new pronouns that are coming out for different kind of people. That's, that's human beings, and that's kind of it. And I'm also like, I have these young people saying to me, why do we have to say he or she? Why do you need to know that I'm a he or she? What does it do? And I was like, well, I kind of need to know. I didn't actually have a good reason. And on top of that, as women, why do we have to show whether we are unmarried, married, or divorced? Right? Hello? I mean, what's that all about? Well, maybe in the old days it's like, I wonder if it's a spinster or not. Or whatever it was, the reason was that we should declare that in Miss, Mrs, Ms. So I'm in Ms. As a good boss. It's like, who cares? Who cares? Why don't we even have it? So I should just scrap all of that and not have it. Okay, someone's a doctor, maybe you want to put it. But why do we have to put Mr. or Mrs. what's it? I mean, why? We could just drop that out. When you say the Jordan Peterson say, you can only find out what you actually believe rather than what you think you believe by watching how you act. And I think I brought that one out because I meet a lot of people that are currently on boards talking a lot about inclusivity and diversity, except that boards isn't showing up. So they continue to talk about it and sit in a group of people like them. So for me, words are good, but it doesn't really count. You need to show what it is. I don't have a picture of the IoD board right now, but actually we have a board that's 50-50 men and women, that's 30% ethnic diversity, 30% national diversity, people in their 30s, 40s, 50s, lawyers, accountants, IT specialists, educational specialists. Exactly, I'm actually pretty proud of that board because it just works. It covers everything there is to cover. And that's what everybody should do. And it's not that difficult. But it is really, really difficult when you are in the unconscious area of maturity. When you sit in that area, it's actually not physically possible for you. It's like you don't have those brain connections. And you can only try to develop them to come further up and understand with your heart why it is we should be doing these kind of things and why being inclusive of people that are different from yourself is so important. Because actually, otherwise your organization might just die. I mean, I think that's where we're going, and I wanted to get below the sort of facts of this, that, and the other to actually the behaviors. If you say something, make sure you show it as well. You can't just talk about it. When some IT company came to me and said, could you help me with diversity and inclusion in this firm, and we are having problems, we keep hiring Asian people, we really want them, we're setting up Hong Kong, but they only stay for 2 or 3 years. I was like, okay, talk to me about your board and your management team, what does that look like? It was like, well, what do you mean? I said, what kind of people are there also? I said, men, women? She said, men. I said, look, okay, ethnic, British, what she said, all Brits. I said, any Asian people? She was like, no. I said, so you get an Asian person who wants to move on, who's ambitious, who wants to move up the ladder. Do they see that the door is open for them to reach the top? Are there people like them? Have you shown as a company that the door is open and you can go all the way and end up at the top executives? And she was like, no. I said, okay, don't even talk to me about what to do further down if you haven't sorted that piece. Go back to your board and executive management, say to them, this company, my company says that if you don't fix this, and she's like, I don't think I want to do that. We will need to send them a letter. No. Because that's scary. That's scary business. To actually tell the leaders, what are you doing? Nobody wants to do that. Nobody wants to do that. That's the problem, is when we're all scared of actually throwing the naked truth on the table. Jordan Peterson is not scared of that. He's had a lot of stake for that, but he throws the naked truth on the table. Intolerance of others' views is not simply wrong in a world where there's no right or wrong. It's worse. It's a sign of embarrassing, of you are embarrassingly unsophisticated or possibly dangerous. I love that. Because actually, when you have strong people are often afraid of strong people. But you know what? Do you even know the damage someone who's weak can do in an organization? In a whole different way you don't even see. It just is like underneath there, undermining everything. The strong person, you can generally see what they do. And actually they're a lot less scary than the weak people, if you think about it. So this is about turning everything upside down and trying to think in different ways. When you have something to say, silence is a lie. I'm completely a part of that, because you need to speak up. If you are one of the lucky people that I actually further develop in terms of being able to see inclusivity, to see what is the right way, you have to try to draw people along with you on that journey. And so on the staircase, if you're on the higher stairs, you can go down and operate because you've been through that stage, so you know where it is. But when you can't go higher than the stage you're at. So if you have a board with a majority of people that is at, say, level 3, and you have a CEO at level 5, that CEO has to come down to level 3. Lowest denominator sets the levels, right? And so therefore you've got to watch the people that surround you in your organizations and how they operate, because the lowest denominator sets the place. So if you're happy to be seeing that happening, you also have to be happy to say, this organization will not change because we can't, because these people are actually not able to do that. They haven't developed enough to get that. So once we can all get more of that awareness, I think we have a chance of actually trying to together, all of us together, just come up that curve, roll it, and say, no, actually, let's try to see what we need to do and challenge each other in an uncomfortable way. Allow each other to be more vulnerable. And I think once we get more leaders, it's all about the leaders will lead the way. That's why we call them leaders, right? It's not about doing that further down. It's actually about leading in that way and then bring people with you. But it's very hard if you have a majority of leaders operating at a level where it's simply not possible for them. And unfortunately, I think that's what we're looking at right now. And that's why we haven't moved enough. And that's what we need to challenge. And this is an uncomfortable message to come up with, and I don't really want it on the front page of the Guardian either. But nevertheless, I think it's something to consider. Thank you very much.
And I love the way that Charlotte has deliberately and very proactively challenged the board at the IoD, the executive at the IoD, and she walks the talk, does our Charlotte. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Okay, so we're now going to have the wonderful Laura. Laura McBrown is the Managing Director of G&B Electronics, a manufacturing business. And she's won awards, more awards than you care to mention. She's a representative at Made UK. She's won awards at Made UK. She speaks there. Laura, the floor is yours.
Right, good morning everybody. Tough act, or couple of acts to follow this morning. As Richard said, I'm Laura from G&B Electronics. We're a manufacturing business. I'm proud to share that we have diversity of 50-50 men and women. I'm even more proud to share that our leadership team is also 50-50 men and women. And that's quite an achievement in our sector because we are engineering and management. And so people often ask me how it is that we have achieved this result. And in all honesty, I wasn't really sure. It wasn't ever something we set out to try and achieve. But you know, all accidents have a cause. So the more we thought about it, we realised that a lot of it was to do with our inclusive leadership style. So so we looked at what we'd done differently. So in order for me to sort of explain how it is that we got to this point, it's going to be necessary for me to go back a few years. So if you are all sitting comfortably, I'll begin. Once upon a time, there was an amazing man, my father, started a family business. He worked early in the morning till late at night, dealing with every opportunity, inquiry, problem, issue, everything that came his way. He was so engrossed in his work that he neglected his loyal and dedicated workforce. And as the years went by, they became more and more disconnected from him, and a culture of blame set into the company. By the time my father retired, this culture had become deep-seated and the staff were disengaged. So my sister and I took over the business. So and it was our job to bring that business forward. We recognised that we weren't going to do anything different, but we needed to do things differently. We recognised that we couldn't fill our father's shoes in the same way that he had. I didn't have the skill set, the knowledge, the engineering background at the same level that he has. And so it was important for us to engage with all of the team to make sure that we used their knowledge and we built the business coming forward together. So as all good IoD directors know, failing to plan is planning to fail. So we put together our vision for the future, our mission statements as to how we were going to get there, and our values as to how we were going to do this, and we launched Team G&B as our culture. So very proud of ourselves. We launched into smart objectives and rolling out, what it is that we felt that we were going to do. Success? No. Sadly, we recognised that our autocratic style of management that we had come from, going to smart objectives in one step, was just a step too far. It was too much to expect everyone to do in one go. So we recognised that we needed to just wind it back a step, take things a bit more slowly, and work with the team to come up with something that was a bit more clear in terms of what we were trying to achieve. So in collaboration with our management team and our supervisor team, we come up with, I recognise you can't see this, but you'll get the idea. We come up with sort of 12 objectives that we felt were key to delivering manufacturing excellence. And then we sat down and we described what we felt at stage 4 would be the key sort of outcome, what the picture looked like. Very much described how it was going to look when it was complete. Stage 1, very much what we felt poor looked like, and a couple of steps in between. So what that meant was that when we then sat down with the supervisors and the management team, they essentially had a menu that they could choose from. Each department sort of scores where they think they are on this journey, for whether it's on-time delivery performance, process capability, productivity improvements, training, communication. And they can choose a project that they work with individually in their department, or they can do something as a team. So that started to work well, and our team culture was starting to embed. We had to show that we were not just talking the talk, we needed to show that we were walking the walk as well. It was important that they could see that we were prepared to invest time in listening to what it was that they had to say. And so then taking them on other factory visits, taking time out of the business, getting them to see how other companies do things. We had a team of people that had been there really since they'd left school, and so they needed to get out and see how other companies did things. And also it helped them to recognise that actually what they were doing really maybe wasn't as bad as they had thought. So it gave them that confidence that what they were doing was good. One of the key values that we introduced is a learning culture. And so what we also included in that is learning by our mistakes. So we monitor our cost of quality, most manufacturing businesses do, and that includes our cost of any scrap, cost of any rework, warranty, customer returns. So previously when we had any issues come in, our quality manager would sit down, decide what it was that he thought we ought to do differently, rewrite a procedure and go and train that team with the hope that that would solve the issue. And sometimes it did. And sometimes we had the same issue or a similar issue with another customer in the future. So what we wanted to try and do was use inclusion to get everybody involved in dealing with those issues. So we introduced quality circles, and so our quality manager would pick, what is maybe our biggest cost of quality for that period, and everyone who had been involved in that project or something to do with what had resulted in that cost of quality would be invited to a meeting. So clearly with our blame culture, this had the potential to end badly. So I made sure that I attended all of those first meetings to say, if you know who created this problem or it was you, I want you to keep it to yourself. It's not important. That's not why we're here. We're not here to attribute blame and point fingers. If one person has made that mistake, then it's quite possible, based on the information that we've given you, that anybody else could make the same mistake. So it's important that we understand how we've come to this point and that we collectively come up with a solution for how we can mitigate it in the future. And so once they were given that sort of freedom to talk and share their ideas, the value of information that we got back was far more useful and comprehensive than anything that one person can do from a different department sitting at a desk on their own. So our team G&B was starting to embed. People were starting to believe us. It's born out of the culture that, again, Kate and I couldn't do what our father had done in the way that he'd done it. So it was important that, we brought that whole team with us to move forward. We needed to show that we had inclusion and diversity was something that we were growing and actively trying to pursue within the business. And much as I'm against, positive discrimination, it's important that we get the right team around us. My job is to make sure that we have those conversations, and I recognise that we have a better quality of conversation from a more diverse group. So it's important that most of our departments have a mixture of men and women and ages, and we have within the business tried to promote from within to make sure that the knowledge and skills from other departments are crossed over as well. Sadly today I haven't got time to share all of our stories, but I have picked a handful. I don't have time to share Lee's story about his journey from being in packing to customer service, Sally's journey from the shop floor to being our chief inspector, Richard's journey from being one of our supervisors to our head of operations, Chris's journey to being our lead supervisor for our manual assembly department, or Renata's journey from shop floor to purchasing. So I've had to choose carefully this morning. This is Kim. As we were getting to know the team more and we were having more open conversations, we started to recognise that the team were opening up to us. They were sharing more about them. We were getting to know them on a deeper level. And it came to light that Kim had previously run her own business selling printed circuit boards. But she no longer wanted to do that. Her business had failed for non-payment by one of her clients, and she no longer wanted to spend her time on the road. She'd been working for us for about 7 years doing administration, and we sort of didn't really know any of this about Kim. One of our mission statements is to deliver exceptional customer service. So we recognised that we needed a customer service team, and we were going to need someone to head up that team. We needed somebody that knew the business, that understood the customers, that understood how our business works and the team that we had. And so when recruiting for that role, because of our knowledge of the team that we now have, we recognised that we had the perfect person under our nose. So the benefits to us is that, when I see my clients, they'll tell me, what a fantastic service. We're their #1 supplier. We're the most proactive at coming back to them with queries when they need to know what the status of their job is. They'll tell us that the team that she's developing is doing the same thing. And if I talk to Kim about how she feels about it, she feels like she's more back to her old self. She didn't think that she would have the confidence to do that kind of role again. But now that she's got it under the belt and she's developing her own team, she feels much more like her old successful self. And we're benefiting with, good customer service and the fact that her team are actively increasing our revenue by driving more business through our existing customer base. This is James. James has been with the company since he left school. I think he joined us because his mum said that if he didn't go to college, he'd better come to work with her, and he joined us. So, and he came in year after year, running one of our production lines and programming some of the machinery we have. Was he going to go anywhere? No, probably not. Was he motivated in what he was doing? Probably not really. But my job, James is incredibly bright. Once we start to sort of unpick some of the layers and talk to him about what he was capable of, we recognised that he was wasted sitting in this little corner of our factory. We started to talk to him about doing an HNC in electronics, and he was reluctant to sort of go ahead and do that. And so after a few months of some gentle teasing at any opportunity that presented itself, he finally came to talk to me about it. And his concerns were, what if I fail? What if I waste the company's money? What if it doesn't work out? What if I'm not up to it? And I said, look, James, the key thing with this is that you will learn something to benefit yourself, to benefit us as a business. It really doesn't matter what the bit of paper says. He said, if you go and you show up and you do your best, then that's all I can ask of you, and I will see the benefits of what you're learning back here in the factory. So he agreed to go ahead and do the HNC. So I talked to him about how he was getting on with it, and he did sort of confess to me that he was struggling with the maths element, going from GCSE maths in the 90s to engineering maths in single step several years later was quite an ask. So I got one of the engineers that I know who does mentoring to spend some time with him doing that extra maths curriculum work, and he passed the exams with flying colours. He stuck at it and he did really well. Now James heads up our engineering team. He has a team of 6 behind him, and he couldn't be more motivated. There's nothing that I can't give him that I know that he won't get his head around and sort out. So it's a huge comfort for me to have someone like that as part of my team. This is Deborah. Deborah, anyone that's ever tried to recruit an engineer will know how difficult that is. There's not much coming into the industry, and there's not many people that are keen to do it. But they are massively necessary, massively valued in the industry. And we were struggling to recruit an engineer into James's team. So we dug out some of our old CVs, pre-GDPR, whatever the rules are with that now. We identified that Deborah ticked many of the boxes that we were looking for in this engineering role. Going back to what you said earlier with regards to the fact that if she couldn't tick all the boxes, she didn't want to put her name forward for that. So we rang the recruiter to find out if she was still available, and he forwarded her the CV and said, and she was like, oh no, there's not much here, there's things here that I can't do, I'm not sure that it's really for me. So the recruiter that we work with, known us for a lot of years, he understands that we have an inclusive and development kind of culture within the business. And he convinced her to come and have a coffee and helped her to recognise the value of the things that she could offer rather than worrying too much about the things that she couldn't. I'm sure you've already guessed, Deborah joined our team and has been a massive asset to the team, and also benefits from being part of James's team, someone that understands the value of having someone that believes in you. This is Tony. I included him because I think with our inclusive approach, one of the other benefits that we've had is the fact that the role that Tony now does is not something that we ever recruited for. It wasn't something that we recognised. But as we got to know Tony, we recognised that he had skills beyond what we had recruited him for. So he came in to put together our production folders and work instructions as to how the jobs should be put together. But the more we got to know him, the more we recognised that he had skills with databases and Excel and lean training, which is how to do things more efficiently, so to speak. And so we thought that actually he might make a good productivity specialist. Productivity is key in most businesses, but it's part of our strategy that I talked about earlier. And so it's really important that we build on that moving forward. But our managers have got the jobs to get out, they've got the teams to manage, so for them to have the headspace to also do the development work to improve process can be quite a challenge. So to have someone within the business that they can give that problem to, often they know what they want, they know what they need, they know what data they want to measure, but to have someone that can go off and create the reports, work it all out, come up with different software solutions, so not just on the shop floor, but actually are there things in our administration team that we should be automating. So whether that is matching invoices using AI, or whether that is importing data into our system, or whether that's when we're doing estimating, rather than going online and looking everything up individually, we can automate that and pull all the data down from the websites that we use. So all of those things, he can spend the time working out rather than putting extra pressure on our managers. So obviously there's a lot of benefits there that we've had as business, commercially and as part of the team. One of the benefits that I recognise is that because the ownership of the strategy is with the team and they can come up with their own ideas, there's no pressure on me to try and make them do things that we need to do to improve. They're their ideas, they're driving them forward, and we benefit because it's something that they find would be useful when they're working at the coalface. So we've been doing all of that, and we're sort of getting to the end of our last 5-year plan, so which involved my father's retirement and us moving forward. And so we're now starting to think about, well, what should we be doing next? So how can we continue with our inclusivity? And what we decided to do, we're doing all this SWOT and PESTLE, traditional sort of stuff, and competitor analysis. But we felt that what was really important was to understand with the team what they felt they needed. So we embarked on a journey to interview everybody, all 58 of the team that we have. We deliberately didn't set a time frame for doing this. We wanted to make sure that we could get the maximum out of each session that we had. And we recognised that pulling up, one of the team from the shop floor to come and have an interview with 2 directors was going to take a little while to get them to sort of relax into that. So it was very informal. Just did it over coffee in my office, just having a chat about what they do, what they spent a lot of their time doing, what they felt was a waste of their time, what they enjoyed, what they didn't like so much. There's always someone that likes the thing that you hate, so if we can try and match that up a bit and think about what they like, that will help. What they would like more training in and how they would like to progress within the business. And I think if you're going to do this, one of the things that I would say was the top tip would be if someone sort of mentions like a throwaway comment, don't let it pass by. So we'd often get towards the end of the meeting and they'd say, I'm just going back to do this, it's such a pain kind of thing. And I said, well, yeah, tell me a bit more about that. And they say, oh, well, we've got to wander from one end of the factory to the other end of the factory to do this and then carry everything back again. Things like that. And it was just, by just going, just being curious and just listening to what it is that they were actually doing has been really useful. So the benefits of that, a little bit too early to tell. But I think that the key thing for me is that I now have a huge amount of data to select from. In fact, I think when we put it into a list, I think we have over 700 different opportunities for improvement. Be careful what you wish for, right? But I think there's a lot of commonality in there, and apart from anything else, that will help us to score what we should be working on first, and who should be involved, and how we should get it project teams put together when we should, do these individual different projects. And I think that when we roll this out, because the team know that they have been involved in creating it, I feel confident that they will be behind me in what it is that we are trying to achieve, and that we will be on the same page. So I think I'm just going to finish with a challenge for you. So what can we all do today to help us reap the benefits of inclusivity tomorrow? Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's always very, very, very wonderful to hear the real stories, and that's one of the big benefits that all of these sessions over the years has given us. So thank you very much indeed, Laura Brown. Thank you. I'd also like just to express my thanks to both Peter and Charlotte for coming along. I know it's a lot of effort to make it today, and those insights have been fantastic. That leads us on to, we're about to have a break, but when we come back, there'll be those fantastic tabletop discussions. And we can take those insights, and we can use those insights to actually generate our discussion as to how we move forward. And this, again, has proven over the years to be a fantastic opportunity to take some real things away for us to do within our businesses. So we're going to come back, if we may, at 25 past. So it's coffee outside, but if we could make it sharp at 25 past, we'll get into the session. Thank you very much indeed again.
What are the biggest risks, would you say, in a well-meaning, traditionally managed business really embracing inclusivity to make diversity work? Laura, good stuff.
Okay, so I suppose the risk is that you're doing something different. Some people will like that, some people will not like that. We've certainly seen that there are people that have got on board, and that there have been people that have got off. So there will be change within the business, not just on a level that you're trying to introduce, but equally there will people be that that they don't like it, and so they may have to join another area or another business that is more in keeping with their values and how they want to work. So there is a risk that you can lose people, but equally it's an opportunity for you to develop people as well. But one of the things that we saw is that when maybe some of those people are removed, the people underneath them sort of flourish. They maybe have been holding people back that you weren't aware of, and so actually you get more without those people in place than you maybe did before.
Sure.
But it's risk.
Yeah, I mean, one of the biggest risks we see is when a business talks about inclusivity and diversity and really makes it a big statement, but they don't follow through. So what that does is a really toxic combination, because the employees are aware of it, and so they're looking out for it. And then when it doesn't happen, they feel much more alienated and more likely to try and get into a conflict position. So it's a very toxic mix of having that as big vision and spreading that message, but not delivering it on the ground. I think that's quite a big risk.
I'd say I'd build on that. I think one of the biggest mistakes people make with any change is to leap in and make change. When you're changing any process, it's much more about listening to start with. So if you try and leap in and become more diverse, more inclusive, without really thinking about it, without listening, you're just going to make mistakes because you don't know what you're doing.
And you don't know what you don't know. Absolutely.
Yeah, no.
I think the biggest risk is that change is messy. When you go in and you change something from what it was, there's the way it was suited a number of people to your comment. So it suits a number of people, and when you then want to go here, the people it suits will become dementors, right, literally. And they will undermine, terrorize, and they will keep doing that. And so I've been in a lot of sort of restructurings and turnarounds for large organizations, and it's the same pattern we see all the time. The people who doesn't want the change become terrorists, and then you have to let them hang themselves in the string that you give them to be as much terrorist as they can possibly be. And interestingly, because they don't want the more enlightened change, they're really good at hanging themselves, and then they find out naturally at some stage that they've got to move out because actually this movement is not stopping. But sometimes they win. And that's the other real big risk. Sometimes they win. So you have to actually allow them to hang themselves.
And is there a point where you can make a decision about whether you're going to stop them winning or sort of allow them to win and let the play itself out?
That doesn't work. You have to stop. You have to, if they start winning, you've got to then go in generally from the board and then cut through the shit and then get them out, basically. Sorry. This is why people are scared of me.
Stop apologising.
Peter?
Well, I echo what's been said. I mean, I think your points were spot on. People get very comfortable in their little tribes, and then you're going to disrupt that tribe. But it can work from both ends, and this conformity thing is such an interesting thing, because of course we've talked a lot about authentic management, and sometimes you think, so does that mean I can just be an arse all of the time? We've all got to sort of fit within certain guidelines, and we may be different, and we've got to accept also, yes, but there's some certain norms that we need to try to get to. And getting that balance right between this idea of conformity, which means it's suppressing independent thought, but allowing people to express independent thought within some constructs of normal behaviour, if you like, is a very difficult thing to get to.
Not saying shit all the time.
Not saying shit all the time. Actually, I have no problem with that. But it's true. I mean, sometimes, and this is why understanding culture and behavioural norms is so important and so difficult. And the other point I would say, which is tokenism. I see a lot of that, and unfortunately HRs can be guilty. Oh, but we put in a network for race, or we put in an LGBTQ plus network, job done. It isn't, and it's so much more than these things, and it really is understanding the cultural integrity and all of the other things which we've all described.
But reverse mentoring can then also be LGBTs
Oh,
mentoring
gosh,
non-LGBTs.
yeah.
It can be,
It's
you
all
know,
of those
autistic
things.
people
Yes,
mentoring
yes.
non-autistic. It can be
Yeah,
just
I mean,
turn it
I've got
upside
reverse
down.
mentees of
Turn
that
everything
nature.
upside down, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. One of my heroes, the creator of the inverted organisational chart, that's what he did. Turned the whole business upside down, and it wasn't fluffy because that business has just gone through the $10 billion mark. So inverted pyramids where you've got servant leaders at the bottom feeding the people at the coalface, making the money for the business, is a $10 billion win for HCL Technologies. So nothing fluffy there.
I was just going to, Vineet
Nair.
who wrote the book, Employees First, Customers Second, and described the upside down organisation.
One of my absolute heroes, Vineet Nair, and nothing fluffy there.
No.
And the chair of the IoD in Berkshire worked for Vineet Nair and said he was the hardest boss he ever had in his life, but the best boss he ever had in his life. So there we go. Table questions from the floor, I think, probably. Yes, we've got a question over here.
I'll stand because I can't see you all, but thank you all for your talks, they're so interesting. We were talking a little bit, and actually it's based on what you've just been talking about, this idea of business case versus politically correct. And we were talking a little bit about risk and how much do we challenge. From your opinions, to what extent do you think leaders are willing to accept kind of a more deeper understanding of systemic bias and things like power and privilege? And to what extent should we be a bit fragile when it comes to talking about those really deep and difficult discussions that can actually make a massive impact?
Who wants to take the lead on that one?
So what I touched on was, I think leaders need to lead. That's why we call them leaders. They need to lead difficult conversations. So conversational leadership is something that I'm signing up to a lot. They have to make themselves vulnerable to allow other people to become vulnerable. If you don't do it yourself, you're not allowing the space for other people. And that's very much a two-way thing. There are things about us individually we don't want to share because we know it will be held against us. And we all have that, I have that as well. And that's something we have to try to work our way through to actually allow that vulnerability to come out and say, yes, it's like this, and can we share and support each other? I mean, we're just talking about having menopause breakfast at the IoD. We were supposed to have one last week, but the flights didn't fly. But basically put it on the table, but not just menopause. Midlife crisis for men is not talked about enough, but it's a real thing. Things happen inside, and it's confusing, and it's uncomfortable, and suddenly you see yourself on a motorbike with a younger woman and you don't know what happens. talk about it.
But just to echo that thought, Charlotte, I mean, it's about power. The power relationship is so interesting. And how long have you used the language of my job is to empower, and you don't see it happening? Because they're using power to control, not to empower. Now, empower requires trust in two directions. Trust is, again, such an underrated asset of a business, but it's got to work both ways. And what I see a lot of is business leaders talking about the people need to trust me, and that the business leaders not trusting the people. So Danita and I was a good example of that again, is saying that I've got to trust, I've got to empower and trust the people on the front line to do the right thing for the customer, not me always telling them. But those old paradigms of work, a command and control and power usage in that way, are very deeply entrenched. And it's a generational thing in many ways. I mean, I do see new leaders coming in and say, well, why do you work like that? As we've all discussed. And I think, Laura, you touched on it, which it's a difficult thing to talk about when it was your father and you used some of those words about power and control. And then you're coming in as the next generation saying, hold on a second, that's not how we've got to run the business. And this is 21st century leadership. But it is hard to do with a generation that's grown up with the idea that I have power and I'm going to use power to control.
I think also, though, there's definitely something in there about, we ran a survey last year which we called the Cultural Economy Report that looked at the culture in small businesses. And one of the things we found was that the people in small organisations who are most at risk of mental health issues are the bosses, because there's nowhere for them to go. And I think there's something about the way we communicate as organisations that if a boss has the courage to be vulnerable, the organisation has to have the empathy with the boss to allow that vulnerability. So there's a give and take in that, which is a really complex thing, because for so long small business owners have felt the pressure of it's all on them. So there's definitely a two-way street that we need to get to.
That's why we have the IoD.
There you go. Brilliant.
We need to talk.
You'll come from that.
I mean, we see some examples where, a lot of examples where the trust is broken down, and I think it's a situation where there's that old control model, and perhaps there's certain discriminations there, or maybe there's no discrimination, but they tolerate it on the ground, they just let it happen. And then it can be a small thing, a very small thing, that actually taken by itself looks quite ridiculous. Like, why this has happened to this employee? Why are they going to an employment tribunal? But it's not just that small thing, it's the tip of the iceberg, and there's such a lot of other things that are going on underneath it, which have built up slowly, but allowed to go unchecked. So it can be quite a dangerous culture if it's not addressed quite quickly at the top.
Yeah, I mean, from our perspective, to go back to what we were talking about earlier with regard to our next 5-year plan and that interview with all the team, when they've all come into my office to have that coffee and have that conversation, we've had to preempt that with we're looking at our next 5-year plan. We need to make sure that we invest in the right areas and recruit in the right areas and develop processes and procedures that are important to our future. And I don't really know what those are. And so I need to talk to you guys, my team, to find out what you think we need. Because if I sit up here in my ivory tower and go, right, what I think you need to do is this and what you need is that, and you should do this differently, then we're not going to get the engagement from the team to do that. So once they recognise that actually I was asking for their help, their insights, their knowledge, and asking them to share that with me, they trusted me because I was trusting them. And that's, that was key to why it is we now have our 700 projects.
And before I open up, what was the sort of impact of that in terms of the people's perception of coming up to your office to talk about this stuff? I mean, how was that sort of in their skin when they were coming up?
So certainly the first few were a little bit nervous about it, but it really was, and that's why we didn't set a time limit. We needed to make sure that we put them at ease and just kind of chatted before we sort of launched into, tell me a little bit more about, how you do your job. Forgive me, I don't quite understand what you mean by that. Can you explain it a little bit more? I've never done, stores work, or I've never done, whatever it is. Can you, and really just very simply and gently just kind of let them explain what it is that they do. We have a monthly all-hands meeting, so the whole company gets together. So I'm able to sort of share the progress that we've made on this project. And so, I sort of said, Sam, she did our first one. She's totally fine, so you'll all be as fine as well. So, we've tried to make it a little bit light-hearted as well, in as much as, actually we're just information gathering, and it really is nothing more than that. You are the experts. You've been doing it for longer than we have, and we need for you to share that with us.
Cool stuff. Wolf. Question from the floor. Yes.
Hi, Michael Butcher from Skillside. We haven't talked much about recruitment. I think it's probably fair to say that IQ and extroversion are sort of the two main indicators of future performance in recruitment. What are the other traits that we need to prioritise to enable more diversion and inclusivity? Because not everyone has huge amounts of IQ and extroversion. I don't think it's necessarily the area we should focus on.
Laura, I know you've got a story around this, about recruiters and getting the right people into your business. Do you want to take the lead on this one?
Okay, yeah. So in terms of looking at how we recruit the people that we get, we need to make sure that we obviously get the best people into the business. My job is to get the best people in my team, and sometimes that requires looking outside the box. So it's really important that our recruiter understands what we're looking for, the fact that they don't have to tick all the boxes, and that we will do something different. So I've got my business development manager here with me today. We've always struggled with sales in manufacturing industry. So traditionally it's been an engineer that kind of understands the technical, that then needs to adopt a sales role in order to go out and sell the business. And engineering, people who traditionally like to lock themselves in a cupboard and work on a problem, to sort of force them out to go and do cold calling and sales is not a combination that is easy to find in people. So we've sort of done that a number of times, and we've bashed our head against the same brick wall, really not made much progress. So we thought, okay, well, let's just try something completely different. So David has a sales background. He comes from the car industry, BMW trained, so it's all about process with sales. He's got a fantastic reputation in that sector for knowing how to manage a sales process. So we've decided, let's try something different. Let's bring someone with the sales skill set into our business engineering sort of environment and just see whether that gives us a different result. So Blessing is sort of 3 months in at the moment, so it's a steep learning curve for him. But actually, if we adopt a process that is about sales, then he's being very successful at doing that. So it is about just trying something that's not what you've tried before, and just having an open mind when your recruiters bring you someone that doesn't necessarily tick all the boxes, and they need to understand that you have an open mind and put those people in front of you.
Educating your suppliers, basically.
I think it's also about when you're recruiting, what is your definition of inclusion? Because some businesses in the past get caught out. They've employed males and females, for example, equally, and then they've got caught out on age discrimination. So inclusivity is not just about one gender or another gender, or it's it's ethnic, it's age, it's disabilities. Inclusion includes a lot of things. So it's just bearing that in mind as well.
Doing the line, so it's your turn.
Oh, okay, my turn. I would sort of dispute the premise, IQ and extroversion. I just so fundamentally disagree with that I think we just got to do everything possible to find the right people. I do pretty much every second interview that we're hiring at Breathe, and I don't look at the CVs because they don't tell me anything useful. Somebody who's done the interview before me has proved that person can do the job, but I'm much more interested in understanding the person that's behind it, and we just need to interview for the person, not for any particular perceived quality.
But they may not have got to that interview because of the way things are felt with
Potentially.
Yeah.
Maybe
And that's my job as a leader to.
Maybe we shouldn't even look at them. Right?
Yeah.
I don't like people with blue eyes. Like, what can I do about it, right? So I guess so. I'm very much for sort of personality testing and everybody understanding. So we did so back in the 90s when I was in dealing rooms in the city, we did a testing of the team. We were in 30 people. It like there's a bird personality. You're either an eagle or an owl or peacock or dove. So those 4, and we all got put into those 4. So the head of that team was a peacock, and then we had 27 peacocks. We literally had 27 peacocks, right? And then we had 1 eagle, and 1 owl, and 1 dove, and that was it, right? So you're looking at it like, oh, okay. So this back in the 90s, and we're now 30 years later, and we haven't really moved forward. That should be an integrated part of any process. Maybe the full psychometric testing is a bit deep, but it's very helpful, but maybe it's also expensive. So, but the basic, or Myers-Briggs, whatever, there's enough of them out there. What are you, and ensure that we don't have all the same kind. There's a good spread of the different personalities. I think that's key. And with that, you'll probably then start getting some different kind of talent to the table. And then on the diversity, conscious. You have to be conscious about it and have mapped it out. The different generations, the different backgrounds, the different genders, the different ethnicity, the different nationality. Conscious. You can't just flow with it and think it will happen. It doesn't. You have to consciously want to tick all those boxes in your organization.
Yeah, and inclusion starts with the recruitment, and you're right, Mike. I mean, whether you're working with search agencies or you've got your kind of massive process of trying to whittle down from a long list to a short list, all sorts of biases appear. Age discrimination. We've had a long view in business, we've got to recruit STEM graduates and all of this. Well, that's not inclusive. So you're absolutely right, Charlie. You've got to think about all these dimensions right from the get-go. Then you've got to think about the process and all the inherent biases that exist. And they're very challenging to overcome, as I touched on. I mean, recruiting people are different. I mean, we have all these debates now about AI. Is AI going to help or hinder? Is it biased of itself? And of course, if you build bias into AI, guess what? It's biased. But I do believe that AI will be part of the future, but we've really got to understand. We're going to unpick the black box and understand where we are building in bias, and a lot of those sorts of things happen. But I see other things going on, redacting CVs, taking names off them. So if you're called Mohammed, I'll take the name off. Well, at what point are you going to sit in front of somebody and recognise you're called Mohammed? I mean,
and so what?
And so what?
Yeah.
So I think we try these things we've all agreed today, which is a very important outcome, I think, that we've got to try some things, and we've got to be prepared to look for the evidence as whether it's working or not. And if you find that redacting Mohammed off the CV is somehow working for you, okay, well, knock yourselves out. But there are a lot of things in recruitment we've got to think about very, very differently. We've got to try things.
But it's a journey, right?
It's a definite
journey.
And
this is where I come in, the maturity in it.
Yes.
We have to get to the place where it doesn't matter the colour of the skin of the person sitting in front of you. I don't want my children to get jobs on the colour of their skin.
No.
I just want them to get jobs on the talent they have, the raw talent, and the work they're prepared to put in. That's all. Right?
But even on psychometric tests, I think there's a lot of involved bias in that. Sure. I mean, guess how psychometric tests like Myers-Briggs are developed? Largely on white, male communities. Right. There's a fascinating book called Invisible Women, and the lady who wrote it is coming to talk at our future work conference in June. Talking about all the biases, I mean, one of my favourite seat
belts.
You wrote
about the medical thing as well.
Yeah, the medical thing. Seat belts. Guess why more women get injured by seat belts? They're designed by men. So there's so much of this stuff we have to understand, and recruitment is where real inclusion starts.
Cool. Table the next, yes, over here.
My name's John Waters from a company called Demolish the Wall. Bearing in mind the recent Deloitte report into stress in the workplace, and it now becoming probably the biggest single reason due for staff sickness, and without doubt the biggest burden directly and indirectly on the NHS. What are you doing to identify and mitigate stress in your organisations?
I would go back to conversational leadership. You have to have the conversations, otherwise you don't find out. As you also, you have the conversations, things will come out, and encourage people to bring by leading that conversation yourself. I mean, and well done bringing your conversation to the table. Of course, that's what we need, but it takes allowing yourself to be vulnerable, and most of today's leaders are not willing or able to do that. That's the problem we need to address.
And I think the conversations need to happen way before somebody shows any sign
Absolutely.
of stress, because it's this the concept that I love of the idea of the stress bucket, that different things build up the level of stress in a person, and it's often the seemingly silly, inconsequential thing that tips them over the edge. There's no tea bags in the kitchen, or And that's not downplaying it all. It's having those conversations so that you understand the people who work for you, with you, so you can see the early signs when they're not behaving like they normally
I
behave.
think it's such an important subject you've raised. I mean, we've done lots of surveys which point at the same thing. Stress is the biggest source of absenteeism from work, and it's getting worse. And the world we're living in with all this uncertainty, interestingly, you look at well-being, financial insecurity, all these sorts of things. But stress is also positive, right? We have to understand that. I mean, all these behavioural science research shows that people come up a peak of operating on stress, then they tip over very quickly onto the other side. And it is not a single curve. Every person is different. And understanding that, having the conversation. So I might work in a particular way, and I do, and I probably stress a lot of my team out because of how I work. So I have to talk to them, say, look, just because I'm doing emails on a Sunday night, I'm expecting this of you, you've got to tell me, is that working for you? And be open to that kind of challenge. Because stress trickles down a lot. And I've talked to a lot of business leaders about this. They said, why can't all these people do what I do? They said, because they're not you, and they don't work like you. And why should they work like you? And I mean, I made those examples of younger generations coming into the workplace and said, why on earth would I have to work like that? Is that what work is about? That I've got to work sort of 50 hours a week, and if I don't work hard enough, I get told off, and I get answer all my emails overnight, and now I've got social media, and I got to do all this stuff. That cannot be the future of work.
One of the things we've done just on
important.
that very point actually is bending our, on a small scale, bending our roles to fit people's family lives rather than expecting them to bend their family lives to fit our roles. And that's working so effectively because they feel, really committed because actually they're not doing it in conflict with their home life, they're doing it in confluence. And that's made a massive difference. And I think that really is something that small businesses can really seize ground on, because the big monsters are very slow. And you made the point earlier on, financial services, which is where I'm in. It's terrible at this stuff. They're in the dark ages of this stuff, so it's still a much.
But you're saying, I mean, the whole flexible working idea is definitely one of those responses, but it's a big cultural shift, as I touched on. I mean, we have this presenteeism. Presenteeism, interesting, has become a bigger problem than absenteeism.
I mean, in our business, Kate, who is also our HR director, she's our mental health first aider. So we've invested in that role in-house. But she also spends a great deal of her time on the shop floor, getting to know the team and making sure she understands, the challenges that they face. I think when you run a business and you start to realise the challenges that everyone have outside of work, because you're privy to information that the rest of the team aren't, you realise that everybody, almost without exception, is dealing with some sort of issue outside of work, whether it's a child that's going through bullying, a sick parent, a spouse that's unwell. And so she's aware of all that. And actually, she's also able to pick up on some of this stuff. So we have one of our team that goes up and down, and she's connected to him on Facebook, and we know that if he starts to put a lot of stuff on Facebook, not necessarily anything to talk about the issues he's going through, that actually he's heading towards a bit of a meltdown. So she's able to talk to him at work before anything happens, to sort of say, talk to us about how you're feeling. Is there anything we can do? Are you okay? Is anything we're doing here stressing you out? And so she's a step ahead of the curve. But we're a small team, so she's able to link in to be.
But you're still doing it in a 50, 60 person business. So by SME standards, that's not necessarily small, and it is a commitment. That is exemplary. That's an exemplary sort of behaviour. If you can do it in a manufacturing business of 50, 60 people, then anybody in this room can do it.
But that comes back to both of you talked about line managers and training line managers. Now that's where it's got to go in bigger organisations, isn't it?
Yeah. Or there will be different kind of. There's nothing worse than middle management, right? It's hell to be middle management. It's hell to deal with them up and down. It's just not a great place. So a much flatter structure where you have different kind of maybe teams of what you have. So here's the health team, and they work around with everybody. But actually everyone can reach the top very quickly if needs be. But you have, instead of having, this is right man, you have to go here, to go there, to go there. Actually, it's much, no, there's this over here that will support you if you start feeling. It has to be spaghetti, right? Not silos.
Yeah, I mean, we go back to our manufacturing strategy that I talked about earlier. Under our health and safety element, in our sort of nirvana area, we've got that no one's going to go home from work feeling worse than when they arrived. And so that is going back to your point, is about the team, to make sure that, you know, if someone is even a bullying element or excluding people from their team, that needs to be addressed by the supervisors and managers in those areas. So that is what we are striving to try and achieve, and give our management and supervisor teams the skill set to be able to keep their eyes open to recognise these things, and also the skill set to be able to have those difficult conversations.
The only thing I'd add, Laura,
Nobody
is
goes home feeling worse than when they came in.
but make sure you're looking after managers too. I mean, a lot of this stuff is saying, okay, so we've got to make sure the managers are trained and they've got to worry about it. Well, managers are very vulnerable too. I mean, there's fascinating stuff from the, what they called, research on well-being over your life cycle, and guess what? It goes up as you get into your late teens, early 20s, and then guess where it goes from there? Right? And it only starts to pick up, interesting, as in my life stage, late 50s, early 60s, and it starts to pick up again. So where are most of your managers? They're in that dip, because they've got all those other constraints. So the only thing I'd just say when you have things like mental health first aid is, for goodness sake, make sure you're looking after the mental health first aiders, because the mental health first aiders often are the people who volunteer to be a first aider because they themselves have experienced it and they themselves are vulnerable. So this has got to be a very collective thing. It's not just about, well, middle management sorted all that, because interestingly, they're often the most stressed.
Absolutely. I told my son never be an operations manager. One final question. The young man in the room.
Sorry, Tom Nicholson from Surrey University. You talked a lot about reverse mentoring and the shadow boards, junior boards, all that sort of stuff. What are you looking for with these sort of junior leaders that you're looking for?
Difference. We're looking for someone who dares being different, and we find that a lot with younger people. So the IoD will start this year to work closer with universities and have students being reverse mentors to our members across the UK for as many as we can get out. And then the next step from that is hopefully after student they'll become an associate, and then there will be an opportunity to have advisory boards, we will call them, or next gen advisory boards, but actually bring those people so all of our businesses can then have these students that we have taken on a journey to be advisory boards for them on a voluntary basis, but that's how they build their board skills. And what they have to be is courageous enough to put the conversation on the table, which I find that young people are inherently. So that often comes on its own, because actually they have so much information come their way and is using it in the right way. So it's not your typical, has to be someone who's super ambitious and doing this and this. It's the whole range. You know, neurodiverse people, people from different social backgrounds, people who never wear a tie. You know, all the differences we need to bring to the table to have the most outcome and get the most. I mean, in other places I work with boards who specifically asking me, can you bring to us next gen boards? And so I had to think of a scalable way, and the IoD is that scalable way where we can actually do that as an organization, and everybody can benefit from it.
I mean, just a couple of big thoughts. We've been doing a lot of work on what are sort of core and essential skills. I mean, it's fascinating how long we've debated things like employability skills and all these other things and never come up with any consistent definition. And many young people coming into work think it's all about their CVs and how many qualifications. And yet, you've all acknowledged, and most businesses I've talked to say, well, I'm not even looking at the CV. One of you said that. I'm looking for these other attributes. So what are these other attributes? And we need a clear definition of them. And they are things like critical thinking and empathy and collaboration, communication skills, things of that nature. The sad thing is that there are a lot of young people coming into work who think it's not only about their qualifications, but they can't easily demonstrate these skills, which we're actually really looking for. And I see, and I talked a bit about socioeconomic status. This is also about social mobility. If we understand that what we're looking for, things like critical thinking, all these other things, you can do that. I don't care what background you came from, and it's a very inclusive idea. So we're working with groups like the Social Mobility Commission, because we need to get this into the education system. We do not have enough good advice for young people coming out of schools. They're constantly told what they've got to do is go to university, and that's their route to riches, and that is not true. And businesses are saying, looking for other things now. So that's a very important part of this dialogue as well.
I suppose from our perspective, it really is just the fact that someone's going to come in and go, why do you do it like that? Where we've all got blind to the fact that we've been doing like that for ages, and just some fresh eyes and a fresh perspective with no learned behaviours from anywhere else in business, just for them to just ask the obvious question.
And how does the business find a young person that wants to be a leader, and has that young person who wants to be a leader find that business? I'm not entirely sure yet, still looking, but if someone's got the answers, let me know.
You know.
And I think behind the why is a genuine interest. It's not necessarily just stupid. It's actually, why is it done like that? There must have been a reason at some point it was done like that. Maybe there wasn't, but you know, real genuine why.
Ladies and gentlemen, your panel. Thank you very much.
Hello, I'm from Breathe HR, and I'm just here to kind of say that we're extremely proud to be sponsoring this event for the IoD and CIPD, mainly because talking about culture and inclusivity and diversity is something that really aligns with the culture of Breathe as an internal company, but we always try and kind of encourage anyone who uses our software, but also who we partner with as well, to kind of really challenge themselves. And that's the theme that I'm getting from today, is to really kind of go home, look at what we can do to challenge ourselves personally, but also as a business. And that is something that Breathe in particular really, really wants to do. So please come and see us, have a chat with us. We've got a culture economy report, as Jonathan mentioned, and you're welcome to take things from that.
Thank you to Breathe HR, and thank you also
So let me formally thank Natalie and Jonathan and Breathe HR for sponsoring, as well as that Sahid and Custodian. So I really think, can we just give them a show of our appreciation?